Yo, what's going on people? It's your boy Ape Huncho, back at you again with another video, and we finally got the appeal papers into this SJ and NPK murder trial over the murder of Kamali Gabidon Link. Now, I'm not going to take you through everything, but I've extracted and made sure of what I can to give you a clear picture as to what exactly was reported in the appeal papers. So it starts off with reading: this case arises out of the killing of Kamali Gabidon Link and the wounding of Jason Frazier on the 22nd of February 2019. The two victims were members of a gang known as the Wood Green Mob. The defendants were members of a rival gang called the Northumberland Park Killers. The rivalry had been a violent one, with each gang carrying out attacks on the other and then boasting about them online. In the autumn of 2019, at the Central Criminal Court, aka the Old Bailey, before HHJ Foster and a jury, 5 defendants were tried for the murder of Mr. Gabidon Link and the attempted murder of Mr. Frazier. Shareem Kutkorm, aka Shems, was convicted of murder, attempted murder and possession of a firearm with intent to endanger life. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 28 years. He has not sought to appeal against conviction or sentence, just like I kind of predicted in my previous video where I covered the situation. It does go through everybody else as well on what they were charged with along with their sentences, but again, just for context of the video, I'll leave that out because again, they did go up for their appeal hearings. A more detailed timeline of events is then told to the court, which I actually am going to read to you guys because there's definitely some points in here that hasn't been brought up in previous reports. So it reads: on the night of the 22nd of February 2019, Kamali Gabidon Link was stabbed to death in a hair salon in the Wood Green area of London. Moments earlier, his associate Jason Frazier had been subject to a similar assault during which he sustained 8 stab wounds as well as gunshot injuries, but which he survived. Trills and Osav, as well as the accused Shems, all accepted links to the Northumberland Park Killers. Osav and Sneaks had Instagram accounts that included the initials NPK in the account names. The two victims were both linked to the Wood Green Mob. 2 days after the killing, a music video featuring Trills and others was uploaded to YouTube. In this video, the rappers referenced an earlier killing and other previous stabbings committed against other members of the Wood Green Mob. In May of 2019, SJ, along with 2 others, appeared in another video in which they rapped about gang-related activity and the possession of knives and firearms. On the night before the incident, SJ, Sneaks and Osav were captured together on CCTV on the Broadwater Farm Estate in Tottenham using a Peugeot car which allegedly belonged to SJ's mother. On Friday the 22nd of February at around 7 PM, SJ and Osav, together with 3 other unidentified males, were caught on CCTV cycling towards the same estate. SJ could be seen going to the Peugeot car and changing his clothes. The prosecution alleged that the CCTV showed that Sneaks was also in their company, although Sneaks disputed that it was him and that he was even there during the events of that evening. But again, from the jury's verdict in the case, as you can see, it was accepted that the man alleged to be Sneaks by the prosecution, who was actually given the codename Partridge during the trial, was in fact Sneaks. About an hour later, a group of cyclists rode from the estate towards Wood Green. The group contained Trills, SJ, Sneaks, Osav, Shems and 2 others. Each member of the group had their face covered, and upon reaching Wood Green, they stopped outside a branch of McDonald's, and Trills, Osav, Sneaks and one of the unidentified males, who was given the codename Buzzard, entered the restaurant. They walked up to one of the tables at which 2 young females and a young man were sitting, and Trills grabbed the young male by the throat while Buzzard attempted unsuccessfully to take his mobile phone. Fortunately, that incident came to an end without violence. Around the same time as the group had been making its way to McDonald's, Kamali Gabidon Link, Jason Frazier and 2 associates arrived in Wood Green only a short distance away. On spotting the group of 4, the defendants immediately dropped their bicycles. At least some of them drew weapons and they ran towards the group of 4. Shems drew a handgun which he fired. The cartridge casing was later recovered and was consistent with the firearm being a semi-automatic handgun. SJ and Sneaks both brandished large silver knives. Although the precise number of shots from Shem's handgun was not known, witnesses recalled hearing 2 or 3 rounds being discharged. One of the discharged rounds went across the pedestrian area and in through the open doors of a shop in which several customers and security guards were present, ultimately striking a display stand but without causing any injuries. As the defendants came into view of another CCTV camera, Trills could be seen with a large black knife in his hand. Sneaks was still brandishing his knife whilst Osav had his right hand inside of his clothing, with the prosecution alleging that this was some kind of indication that he was holding a concealed weapon. The 3 fleeing males were pursued by the 2 unidentified males from the defendant's group. Diners in a Nando's restaurant captured part of the events on mobile phone cameras. The defendants appeared to be chasing the fleeing group. Trills, Sneaks and Osav all ran past the restaurant. Trills and Sneaks had knives in hand, and Osav had his hands still inside his clothing. A little while later, Kamali Gabadon Link and Fraser ran east along Lordship Lane, and Fraser was carrying a knife. The defendant and associates group of 7, now all once again on their bicycles, followed about 20 seconds later. Kamali Gabadon Link and Fraser took different routes as they ran back towards a parked car. Fraser became cornered by his pursuers in 2 groups in what was described as a pincer movement. He was assaulted by at least some of the members of the group and was stabbed 8 times in his shoulder, arm, legs, and also sustained a wound to the buttocks from gunshot pellets. The assault on Fraser was interrupted by the arrival of Kamali Gabadon Link, who was now driving a Corsa car. He aimed his car for some bicycles belonging to the defendant's group lying on the ground. He drove over the top of Trills' bike, rendering it unusable. He now became the target for the group's attack. As he backed the car away, one of the identified men chased him and tried to strike the driver's window. Trills paused to look at his damaged bike before running towards the Corsa. A couple of seconds later, Shems raised his right arm in the direction of the Corsa, just as he had done when firing his gun previously. SJ dropped his bike to the ground and ran towards the Corsa. 13 seconds later, Sneaks and Osav ran across the road towards the Corsa. SJ and Trills came back into view and collected their bikes. Sneaks and Osav came back into view, with Sneaks picking up his bicycle and Osav appearing to place something into his trousers. This will become very important, so bear that one in mind. Now, CCTV doesn't capture the attack on Kamali taking place, but it's believed that as he managed to get his car stuck between parked cars on either side of the road, his car was immediately attacked by members of the group. So across the road from where his car came to a stop was a hairdresser's salon called Coffee and Cream. There were stylists and customers inside. One of the customers waiting her turn to be served had a baby. There was also an 8-year-old girl and a 4-year-old girl in the salon. These people were witnesses to the car being surrounded by masked figures. One man fired shots at the window of the car before jumping onto the bonnet and smashing the gun down on the window screen. A second man also jumped onto the bonnet and struck the window screen with what appeared to be a machete. Kamali got out of the car, ran to the salon, chased by several men who swung their weapons at him. He ran into the salon but was unable to keep the door closed. The attackers gained entry to the shop. Everyone inside began screaming and rushed to the rear of the salon as the deceased cowered in a corner trying to fend off the attack. He was set upon by more than one attacker who stabbed and slashed at him with their knives, eventually turning away, leaving him fatally wounded. He died in hospital from his injuries. The attacking group made their way back to the car park on the Broadwater Farm Estate where SJ had parked the Peugeot and where they appeared to have changed their clothing. Police arrived on the estate shortly thereafter, and the defendants sought to make themselves scarce. Trills was stopped by police and provided false details. He was searched for weapons, and as none were found, he was allowed to go, saying to officers as he walked away, "I hope you lot cut down on knife violence and all that." On record, it was also noted that when police searched the Corsa which Kamali had been driving, they recovered a shotgun and ammunition from the boot, a machete and an axe from the front passenger footwell, and a knife in the rear door. Eventually though, everyone involved was identified by police from CCTV footage from the Broadwater farm estate during the investigation. So I won't be reading over all the reasons for appeals, but I wanted to highlight OSAV's appeal. So what was told to the court in the original trial was that back in June of 2017, he had a conviction of knife possession at the age of 14 at that point, and the judge basically allowed that evidence to be given in court, and OSAV was appealing the fact that the judge allowed this to happen, which had a prejudice in his trial. Now, a lot of you would have heard that he, quote, snitched in this case, and I'll read out what I believe everyone is referencing to. So remember how, although he was captured on CCTV, it didn't show him actually holding a knife itself, but it did look as if he was holding onto his waistband. Remember, this isn't in the first attack, this is after the murder when he was captured on CCTV with sneaks. Well, he argued that it was handed to him after the murder had taken place, and although the appeal doesn't say he directly said it was anyone including Sneaks, with him being captured on CCTV by Sneaks' side, when he's got his hand onto his waistband, you can kind of put two and two together to say, well, he was basically saying that Sneaks or one of the group had handed him the knife after the murder had taken place. Back to his appeal though, and again they argued that 2017 conviction should have never been presented to the court, but with other evidence such as him accepting that he was linked with NPK, him being captured on CCTV at various parts of that day with the group, and him also being captured on CCTV grabbing his waistband, this would go in the prosecution's favour and he would go on to be found guilty in this case, as you guys will know. At this appeal hearing though, Terrell Graham aka Trolls, his appeal of a 25-year jail sentence would go on to be refused. For SJ, Sneaks and OSAV though, they did go on to get some years knocked off their sentences, and points made out to take into account when deciding on how many years to get taken off. It was believed that SJ, because he wasn't involved in this McDonald's incident, that was to weigh into his favour, and it was argued that even though he did play a role in this whole situation, it was less than that of OSAV and Sneaks, which in turn meant that out of everybody involved in this whole situation that did go on to be found guilty and was sentenced, SJ in fact had the littlest to do with this whole situation. But because he had been heavily involved with the group itself, which included the gang using his mother's alleged car, and this being a potential getaway vehicle, with it somewhat also being a locker for the change of clothes to avoid detection, this is what made him as guilty as everybody else involved. For OSAV, he was diagnosed with attention deficiency hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD for short, and had an IQ of only 80. And for Sneaks, he was the youngest of the defendants, being 4 months younger than OSAV, and a pre-sentence report expressed the opinion that he was immature and easily led. With putting all these factors together, it was concluded that the minimum terms of 21 years for all three was not adequate enough, and so the 21-year prison sentence was quashed and they were handed a 19-year prison sentence each. This means that the earliest time when the three will be eligible for parole will be in 2038. And so we finally have an outcome throughout this whole situation. There will be no more that comes from this situation. So now, again, as you can see, the final release dates for people, well, at least those three, will be 2038. So moving forward, you guys can always reference back to this video for information surrounding this case. But let me know what you guys think of this down in the comment section below. Give the video a little like, and if you want the latest drill, street and music news out of the UK, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. It's been your boy Huncho, and I'm out.